In this section, we're going to talk about configuring our application to work with MongoDB once it's been deployed to Heroku. As it stands right now, my application is set to run against a local instance of MongoDB. You can see that here in my MongoDB connection string. Unfortunately, once I push to Heroku, Heroku's not going to have access to the MongoDB instance running on my development machine. Also, Heroku itself does not offer MongoDB hosting. But what Heroku does offer is add-ons that allow you to use MongoDB with their service. Here I'm on the Heroku website, and I've gone to add-ons and searched for Mongo, and you can see that there are two add-ons listed, one for MongoHQ and one for MongoLab, both of which are hosting solutions for MongoDB. So the first option I have is to use one of these add-ons with my Heroku account. Unfortunately, there's a drawback. With both options, you have to verify your Heroku account, which means using a credit card. So far, Heroku's been absolutely free to set up and doesn't require a credit card. Now, MongoHQ and MongoLab both offer free levels of their hosting service, so even though I would have to verify my account by using my credit card, I wouldn't necessarily be charged any money so long as I use the free version of whichever Mongo hosting solution I choose. There is another option though. Since both MongoHQ and MongoLab offer free levels of hosting, I can sign up directly with them and just use my connection string in order to connect from my Heroku application to my MongoHQ or MongoLab database. So we'll start by connecting from our development box to one of these Mongo hosted solutions. And then we'll be ready when our application gets pushed to Heroku for it to connect to the Mongo host. So first we'll change our development box from connecting to a local MongoDB to connecting to one of these hosted solutions. At that point, when we deploy to Heroku, we'll still be able to use the hosted solution. Now I've chosen MongoLab for this demonstration, but there's no reason that MongoHQ wouldn't be just as good. I'm going to start by going to MongoLab and creating a new database. I've previously created an account with MongoLab. I'm not going to walk you through that process. At this point, I see a control panel that shows me what databases that I've got. Right now I have no databases, so I'm going to create a new one. I can choose a bunch of different cloud providers. I'll just leave it on Amazon Web Services. Down in the plan, I'm going to click on Development, then leave Sandbox clicked. I'm fine with the default version of MongoDB. I'll get a half a gig of storage space, and now I get to name my database, which I'll call Multivision. And now my new database has been created. Now in order to connect to this database, I'm going to need the connection information, which I'll get by clicking on the database itself, and the connection information is shown up here at the top. Here's the information I would need in order to connect using the Mongo shell, and here's the information I would need in order to use a MongoDB connection string. So far, I don't have any users in my database, so I need to create one before I can connect to the database. You can see it's giving me this message here. I'll just go down to Users and click Add Database User. For the database username, I'm going to type in jeames, and for the password, I'll just type in Multivision, all lowercase. At this point, my user's been created, so I'll scroll back up and copy the MongoDB connection string sample that it gives me. Now we'll go back to our code, and I'm going to duplicate this line and put in the new connection string. Then over here I'll fill in the DB user and the password. I'll comment out this first connection line, and now our application will connect to our MongoLab MongoDB instance. Right now our application would fail because we don't have any documents in a messages collection. So let's go to our command line and create one. But I'll first bring back up that MongoLab page so I can refer to that when I'm opening up the Mongo shell. So I'm going to type in Mongo, and then the connection information that MongoLab has given me, then my username, and my password. And now I've connected to my MongoDB instance over on MongoLab. So if I type in Show Collections, you can see that MongoLab has already created two system collections for me. So let's create that document in the messages collection so that when our application requests it, it will receive a value from our MongoLab instance. Okay, now that our document has been created, we can go back and start up our application. And our application is telling us that it has indeed connected to that database. So let's open up our application in the browser. And you can see that we're getting the message from MongoLab. Now let's go back to our code and discuss a problem that we've created. Right now I'm connected to my database on MongoLab, which will be fine when I deploy to Heroku, but when I'm in development, I want to connect to my local database. But I don't want to have to come into this file and constantly be changing that connection string back and forth when I move between development and production. Thankfully, we can easily solve this problem with node environment variables. Remember at the beginning, we created a variable up here called env that holds a string that represents which environment we're in. It defaults itself to development. So let's go back to our code that connects to the Mongo database, and let's write some code that will choose the connection string based on the environment we're in. Now our application is set to use the first connection string if we're in development, and the second if we're in production. Later on in this course, we'll refactor this code, but for now this is sufficient. Now we can test this out by setting our node environment variable when we launch our server. So we'll go back to our command line, and we'll stop our server, and by default we should be in development, so let's start our server up again, and then let's go back to our application and refresh the page, and we simply get our hello Mongo message. Now I'll go back to my command line, stop my server, and now I'll set my node environment variable to be the value production. Since I'm on the Windows command line, I'll have to do that using the set statement. Again, setting this to any value but the string development will put my application into production mode. And now I can start up my server. If I was in a bash shell or on OS X, I could actually shortcut this by simply setting the node environment variable on the same line like this. But since I'm on Windows, we'll have to use this format. And now I've got my server started, but it's in production mode. I'll go back and refresh. And now I'm back to production mode and talking to my MongoDB instance over on MongoLab. So let's set ourselves back into development mode. And our development environment is now set up correctly to run, but since we haven't set the node environment variable on Heroku, when we deploy our application to Heroku, it's still going to be in development mode. We're going to need to change that. In the next section, I'll show you how to set that environment variable to production on Heroku.